MGTOW, short for men going their own way, is a dangerous terrorist group of narcissistic psychopaths just like Elliot Rodger, and everyone should distance themselves from us. Well, that's what you'd think if you had just gotten through watching RockingMrE's newest video about Elliot Rodger. MGTOW, why does everyone hate us? Is it because we're communist leftists? Is it because we're a bunch of Ron Paul loving libertarians? In spite of the fact MGTOW is a philosophy that has nothing to do with partisan politics, leftists accuse us of being right-wing loons, right-wingers accuse us of being leftist socialists, and the reason is obvious: left or right-wing fundamentalists compartmentalize everything that doesn't fit with them, as being the enemy, like two religious groups having a holy war with you're either one of us, or one of them mentality. Is it because we're anti-nuclear family? Well, MGTOW is anti-family like an atheist is anti-religion. Allow me to explain. Anti-religion is anti-theism, which brands religion as something evil or wrong. One could argue that you have to be an atheist before you can be an anti-theist, and thus anti-theism is a type of atheism. But this makes as much sense as saying because the KKK is a type of Christian, Christianity is the same thing as the KKK. MGTOW is not anti-family, just like atheism is a disbelief in the scientific validity of God, not the opposition to God or opposition to concept of God. This again, would be like saying a man who is homeless is anti-home as if he is against other people living in a house. MGTOW is only anti-family when you have built a religion centered on nuclear family as the purpose of life, and turned it into a sacred and infallible concept. When you go around believing that one man, one woman, joined in the eyes of God by a legally binding marital contract, raising biological offspring, is the one and only purpose of all human life, and that any deviation is wickedness and sinfulness and corrupting and damaging to the moral fabric of society. Only when you are this fundamentally obsessed with nuclear family and derive all of your morals from this principle, can you say that MGTOW is anti-family. A man who quits his job, gives away his house and belongings, and lives out in the woods, devoid of material wealth and economic strife, is a man who does not hold money as sacred. This is not the same thing as a man wanting to take away your possessions and kick you out of your home. The man who rejects marriage, isn't trying to end yours. A man who doesn't want to be a father, isn't trying to take away your children. MGTOW do not believe being married is beneficial to men. In fact, we think it is detrimental to men, and beneficial to women. Marriage is exploitative of men. We don't want to do it, and we discourage others from doing it. But we do not shame others who have already done it. We do not wish to be fathers, but we are not shaming others for being fathers. Some of us do want to be fathers, but feel that acting on this want will place us in an exploitive position, and so we forego this desire. Bottom line, choosing to be without, is not the same thing as being against others having. MGTOW is neither left or right, it's not anti-family, or any of the other things we're accused of. MGTOW, what is it? The shortest and simplest answer that I think nearly everyone branding themselves MGTOW can agree on, is, MGTOW is about walking away. MGTOW has been accused of being cowards who are running away. They have been accused of being cowards who are avoiding. These accusations are not entirely accurate. Walking away and running away are two different things. Running denotes fear, however so does avoidance. Yet, not all acts of fear-based avoidance are bad. If you are avoidant to cross a road because you are afraid at any moment some high-speed sports car will come racing over that hill and kill you, your fear and avoidance is phobic and problematic. But if you're standing there waiting for a break in traffic, your avoidance of crossing the road is pretty smart, and very functional. If you need to cross a minefield to get to the radio to contact help, cautiously crossing that field is an obligation if you want to live. Thus avoidance would be an act of cowardice. But if someone tells you to cross that minefield to get a case of beer on the other side, you are not a coward for telling them to kindly go fuck themselves. MGTOW is about living life for yourself, not living up to the obligations put on you by society, for having a penis. And these obligations take many forms, everything from how to dress like a man, walk like a man, talk like a man, getting married, joining the military, self-sacrifice, fatherhood, being a breadwinner, living out the protector-provider role, and so much more. These obligations are scripted by women and reinforced by men. This is a part of gynocentrism. The most powerful force determining a man's role and actions is his desire to have his sexual needs fulfilled by a woman. Women have the pussy, they have the power, thus they script the rules men have to live up to in order to be deemed worthy of mating with them. All of the rules to being a man are written by women, obeyed by men, and handed down from generation to generation. You'll have people who insist that these rules, every last one of them, is completely biological and fundamentally unchangeable, but this is as foolish as stating that all human behavior is a social construct and that humans have no biological instincts. The reality is, human behavior is a combination of biology and environment. Anyone that tells you it's all of one and not the other, is full of shit. Those who say all behavior is environmental are gender ideologues. Those who tell you it's all biology are conservative dogmatists who took the old Christian evangelizing arguments, scratched out the word God and replaced it with the word nature. So in a way, those who claim it's all nature, are also gender ideologues. It's the argument of this is the way men and women ought to be because egalitarianism demands it versus the other side of the coin saying this is how men and women ought to be because it's natural as God intended, while we're all free to speculate on what is environmental and what is biological, and to offer up evidence to support our claims, and have that evidence placed under scrutiny. The moment we discount either nature or environment, we're being a dogmatic ideologue. As I was saying, women script the rules, where biology does not. And as I said, they script the rules because men have a chronic addiction to pussy. This is natural, and women use the offer of their pussy to train and condition men like an animal trained with the reward of food. And I want you to think about that analogy really hard. Think of a circus. Think of all the wonderful playful tricks these animals do. Do you think for a moment that any of these animals do this stuff out in the jungle? Of course not. Even the most strict gender ideologue has to admit that these animals have a biologically determined set of behaviors, and even the most strict biological determinist can't deny the amazing tricks these animals do that they would never in a million lifetimes do out in their undisturbed habitat. As a result of behavioral engineering, animals can be made to do all sorts of things from complex behaviors that take years of very strict discipline to teach, to simple things that last a lifetime, like teaching your dog not to shit in the house. Humans are infinitely faster learners. With amazingly complex behavior, you can train animals to do simple and complex things, through positive and negative reinforcement, and some of these things can even become a second nature that even stick with it for life. And remember, these are stupid simple-minded creatures with poor learning ability, poor memory, who are infinitely more slaves to their instinctive drives than humans who are by comparison amazingly adaptive, flexible, and self-controlled. So if animals that are compulsive, and locked really hard into biological nature, can be trained to do complex tricks, and learn unnatural behaviors for a lifetime, imagine how much training and behavioral modification can be done to humans. Women train men through positive and negative reinforcement, using their temper tantrums, sex, the withholding of sex, their approval and pride shaming, to train men like animals. All their approval, and tantrums and shaming and guilting, only work because men want the sexual gratification they offer. Women easily have men trained like circus animals. If a behavior or a trait suits women, they'll be sure to train as males to have that behavior and exhibit the trait. Is masculinity biological? Clearly not all of it. Do you really think men have a phobic fear and avoidance of the color pink like that color was kryptonite? Do you honestly think listening to Tupac and Megadeth is masculine, and listening to Lady Gaga and Katy Perry is feminine, because it's written into our DNA? Because hormones determine art? And I could give millions of other examples of socially constructed manliness. We men are the trained apes of women. Our role, our masculinity, our responsibilities to our society, largely scripted by women. MGTOW is walking away from the circus and saying I no longer live for your amusement, I don't go your way anymore, I go my own way. Men center their life, their existence, their very identity and sense of self, on women. MGTOW is walking away from woman as center of the universe, and not all MGTOW do it the same way. Some completely avoid women, others only avoid long-term monogamous relationships with women, others just avoid marriage. Some MGTOW reject a lot of masculinity, others are very masculine, and others are anywhere in between. Is a man who no longer wants to be some circus animal, getting up and walking away from the circus, a coward? I don't think so. I think a man wanting self-respect, autonomy, freedom over himself, more than vaginal approval, is a man taking charge of his life and not letting others define him. That actually takes courage, and taking charge of yourself and your own destiny, to me, is a rather masculine thing. Think about it, when you're a teen, you are soft, intimidated, you submit to peer pressure, you yield to the authority of popularity and social approval, you'll pierce anything, smoke anything, drink anything, say anything, to fit in. That's feminine, compromising one's own values and well-being to conform to the expectations of your peers. That is to say, being fashionable, is feminine, and then we grow up, and we don't let peer pressure bully us around. Adults are not immune to peer pressure, but they are significantly less willing to bow down to it. MGTOW is just like that. It's growing up and saying I don't need your approval, I won't jump through your hoops like a trained animal. So is MGTOW. The act of walking away, cowardice? I don't think so, but you know what it most certainly is not? It's not violent. Barbaros made a video about the non-violence of MGTOW. I really didn't think this declaration he made was necessary. MGTOW, by virtue of its core principle and defining trait, is non-violent. It is a passive thing. It's about opting out. It's about walking away. Opting out and walking away. Where's the violence in that? If MGTOW effectively means walking away, how can you possibly equate this with violence, force, coercion? When a bar fight breaks out, the guy walking away can hardly be said to be the violent one. How is dropping out and walking away equated with violence when it by definition is not violence? RockingMrE made a video where he finds the flimsiest parallel between Elliot Rodger and his own personal experience with MGTOW, and tries to associate the murderous rampage with the MGTOW movement. This is identical to how the feminists took the flimsiest parallel between Elliot Rodger and their personal interpretation of men's rights and drew the line connecting the dots and saying Elliot was a men's rights activist. The line they drew between Elliot and the MRM is, they personally interpret the MRM to be about hating women. No one can deny that there are some individuals in the MRM that do hate women, just like no honest person, can deny that there are individuals in the feminist movement that hate men. These feminists claim the entire movement is about hating women, and that the fight for equality for men is a pretense to fight against the progress and rights of women. Well, I don't know if these feminists realize it, but that is exactly what we think of the feminist movement. We think their entire movement is a hate movement using the fight for women's rights as a pretense to attack men and privilege themselves over us. We think that, because that's what it looks like to our eyes, just as I am sure the MRM looks like that in their eyes. But just because you dislike a group, distrust their stated motives, or don't see their point of view, doesn't mean in actuality they are the monsters they appear to be. Any mature person of any sex of any ideology understands this. If we are intelligent and mature, understand that every ideology outside of our own looks stupid, evil, wrong, deceitful, hateful, and so on. Did Elliot hate women? Yeah, he hated women, and wasn't crazy about men either. This does not make him a men's rights activist, since the men's rights movement is not a movement to hate and murder women. Not every woman that hates men and kills one is a feminist, and you can't just call every psycho bitch out there a feminist on the grounds of well she hated men, and feminists hate men, therefore she's a feminist. You can't do that. The idea that the feminist movement is a movement to hurt men, is subjective, not factual. The idea that the men's rights movement is a movement to hurt women is subjective, not factual. Elliot's hatred of women does not make him an MRA, even if you think MRAs are a bunch of misogynists. Using the Isla Vista massacre as a means to attack your ideological opposition is dishonest and a despicable exploitation of human suffering to push a political agenda. It is rotten and underhanded when the feminists did it, and it is rotten and underhanded when RockingMrE did it. RockingMrE drew a parallel between MGTOW and Elliot by saying Elliot hated couples. He was jealous and resentful of them, and this narcissism and psychopathy lead to his murder spree. He then mentions that MGTOW hate him and are jealous of his family, and therefore are potentially dangerous psychopaths like Elliot Rodger, and the MRM should distance themselves from these future Elliot Rodgers called MGTOW.
We can now return to the question of whether the MRM had anything to do with Elliot Rodger. As already stated, the answer is an unequivocal no, if the evidence is anything to go by. That being said, I realised a while ago that the men's rights movement was becoming a magnet for men that can't cope with past trauma, who also exhibit narcissistic personalities. It's the latter part of Elliot Rodger's manifesto that provides a warning about this combination. By the end of his life, Rodger saw himself as a god that was entitled to socially engineer a new society so he could circumvent the perceived female nature that made women poorly select sexual partners. He talked about how women were victims of their instincts and therefore needed to be subjugated. Most of them would be killed off while Rodger watched over them in a vast tower built for him. A few females would be kept alive for artificial insemination, so the human species could continue. Rodger saw his past trauma as justification for his future actions. This is an inherently left-wing perspective. Such people try to level the playing field, or use emotion to exploit the masses, having learned from a young age how to manipulate others. It's here, above all, that the parallels can be drawn to extreme elements within the MRM. Men going their own way, or MGTOW, have gradually become a group of male separatists believing female nature is so inherently flawed that the only solution is for men to cut themselves off from women entirely, or to limit their interaction to sex. Others dream of a utopia where artificial wombs can bypass the need for motherhood and nuclear family, and some await the day robots make sex with women superfluous. The deep-seated hatred that MGTOW feel for fathers like me, simply for being in happy families with the mothers of their children, is stronger than anything even expressed towards feminism. One of the points many have missed when addressing Roger's actions is how much he hated men and women who were in happy relationships, and how he sought to make them pay for achieving what he couldn't. Both feminists and MGTOW feel similar irrational hatred towards the opposite sex and loving relationships. MGTOW and feminists also have a similar grudge towards PUAs, just like Roger. As I said earlier, this video serves as a warning. MGTOW ideology is closer to psychopathy than many will care to admit. Fail to distance the MRM from these extremists, and next time there may be a genuine link to the movement, which could set men's rights back years.
That is an absolutely disgusting lie. Mr. E seems to be too much a narcissist himself to acknowledge that some, if not all, of the heat he got from MGTOW was the result of his arrogant pushing of his nuclear family marriage fetish down everyone's throats. Amazing how Cheswold Almighty got married. MGTOW hasn't bad-mouthed him. I'm MGTOW, and me and Ches are pretty tight. His marriage doesn't bother me. I think the difference here is, you are rubbing your lifestyle and worldview in people's faces and calling them scum, cowards, evil, nihilist, narcissist, psychopaths, collectivist leftists. When Chaz announced to the MRM and to MGTOW that he had gotten married, he made it clear that he is not looking down on MGTOW. He is not pressuring people, or endorsing marriage as some great and necessary institution. He's completely aware of the risks of getting married. It's just something he felt in his heart he needed to do to feel complete. It's the choice he chose to make, not that it's a choice he expects others to make. And no, MGTOW had a problem with him getting married. It's not your family and marriage that people hate and despise. It's your rubbing people's noses in it and telling men to man up and do their duty because nuclear family, nuclear family, nuclear family. You have a religious conviction to the sacred institution of marriage and nuclear family. You're like some evangelist going to an atheist convention and preaching how everyone is going to hell unless they come to church now, and how atheism is wicked, and we are wicked monsters, and then complaining when the crowd tells him to take his proselytizing judgmental bullshit elsewhere, and he gets all butthurt and says, oh boo-hoo, those evil atheists are so wicked they hate me and my congregation because they are envious of the fact I walk with the Lord. Or the atheist going to a church and calling them immoral dogmatists that justify bigotry, and then crying when the church yells at him and tells him to leave. You have made personal judgments and personal attacks on people for not agreeing with your ideology, and you act surprised when they fire back with rude comments. And who knows, maybe some MGTOW assholes did verbally attack you for being married and having kids or something in the very beginning. I ain't going to deny there are assholes in this movement. There are assholes in every movement. I just find it ironic that the man who promotes individualism and a world free of coercion, scolds MGTOW for their individualism, their anti-conformity, and then coerces them by calling them scum, cowards who are running away from their conformist obligation to the collective to be married and reproduce and so on. MGTOW is about no longer jumping through women's hoops to get the pussy and all the hoops society creates to benefit women at the expense of men. It's not about beating our chests and outdoing each other in male-on-male competition to earn mating rights and conform to the demands of gynocentric society. We as individuals are walking away from the expectations placed upon us by the collective society. Yet your entire philosophical evangelizing is about being free of coercion and pro-individualism, yet you ironically act like a fucking dictator telling us men what social rules we have to obey lest you brand us as wicked psychopaths and Marxian collectivists. Who the fuck made you emperor to dictate what our personal obligations are to the collective? Elliot Rodger was not MGTOW. Nor did he live MGTOW lifestyle or practice and preach its virtues. In fact, he was the opposite of MGTOW. He valued people's approval. He wanted people to think highly of him and give him their approval. He was desperate for society's acceptance. That's not going your own way, it is viciously attempting to conform to what society wants. And above all, he wanted approval and acceptance from women. He said over and over how unfair his life was since puberty, all because girls won't love him. And the only thing he wants in life is for girls to give him sex and love and approval, etc. This is the opposite of what MGTOW is. MGTOW is saying I don't need a woman's approval. I won't live my life for them. I will not center my life around getting sex and approval from women. I will not define my worth on the approval of women or the criteria they set. Mr. E, you bring up a supposed parallel between Eliot wanting to reduce female population but keep enough of them around for forced breeding. You then mention the MGTOW belief in artificial wombs growing future generations of humans. These two things are miles apart. First, population is dependent on the amount of females, not males, so lowering female population wouldn't work. Secondly, MGTOW does not suggest that women have their human rights violated and forced to produce babies. In fact, the role of woman as baby factory falls more in line with your traditionalist shit. I'm not kidding. You want women to stay home unemployed, so that they are financially reliant on you, stuck in the home, popping out babies. The entire right wing is anti-abortion and anti-birth control. It's almost like you people see women as nothing more than walking incubators whose job it is to stay at home wholly dependent on a husband for survival, enslaved to her husband, forced to give him sex and babies, and you marriage fetishist flip out when any law gives women the possibility of getting up and walking away. You blame communism for women saying fuck this, I'm out of here and not wanting to live under your thumb popping out babies for a living. And you think you can remedy the problem by blaming divorce on feminism, or getting rid of no-fault divorce, or just keep railing against communism, and this problem will go away and women will go back to being submissive little baby factories completely content with her dependence on you, and never once walk away from your shit when our new age society allows her to make as much money as a man. Your marital dual sphere system fails not because of communism or feminism, but because of technology, and if you want to metaphorically shackle them to the kitchen sink, popping out babies, with no option to leave you, you'll have to erect a strong Islamic extremist society that forbids women to leave the house without a male escort, and forbidden to drive a car, and forbidden to work without husband's consent. Look, I hate communism and feminism, but I won't scapegoat it for shit it didn't do. You traditionalists, you more resemble wanting to keep a woman chained up popping out babies for you, than does MGTOW. You don't get it. You can't financially shackle women to the house as sex slaves and baby factories, when we live in a technological society that allows her to just as easily make a living as men. You might look back to the 1950s, the great golden era, and think technology was there and women were staying home, but you failed to understand that was just a transitional era between the days of horse and buggy and the age of electricity. People are always a few generations behind technology on a social level. The 50s were a transitional period. It's over, let go. You can't keep women financially shackled as your baby-making sex toys any more than Eliot can keep them physically chained up as baby factories. And let's face it, that's your only beef with feminism. Part of it told women to get off their ass and get a job. That ruins your nuclear family utopia, even without Karl Marx, even without Betty Friedan, a world where women are locked up in the house awaiting input from your dick, and giving you babies, and obeying your commands, is a world that was bound to end due to the Industrial Revolution and technology. You can't go back. Deal with it. Thirdly, the mentioning of the artificial womb is not a declaration that all human population will be produced by machines. It is typically brought up as a quip to counter the absurd traditionalist statement that at the end of the day, women are the keepers of the womb, all human life is dependent upon them, therefore men are going to have to just suck it up and bow to what women want since they are the gatekeepers of the womb. Nothing can be done about it, suck it up, and join team marriage, because you can't fight nature. And the human species is dependent upon offspring, thus MGTOW is genocide. Okay, this statement, I am paraphrasing, is fucking absurd for many reasons, but the easiest counter to this is to mention that even if MGTOW caught on and got really big, and even if it led to a serious population decline that threatened human survival, within the next few thousand years, which is actually how long it would probably take for this horribly overpopulated world to actually have its population threatened, by that time we could have artificial wombs mass-produce babies since the technology for that is practically in our hands now. But this isn't something that needs to be worried about for 1,000 or so years. Quit panicking. It is more likely that humanity will nuke itself in a nuclear war before men and women walking away from marriage ends our species. It's a premature panic. You give us a stupid proclamation and we give you a stupid answer. As far as any current advocating for the development of an artificial womb with proper to artificially produce children, I support the technology alongside of genetic engineering to weed out diseases like arthritis, asthma, Down syndrome, and birth defects. This genetic engineering may work better with an artificial womb, and maybe some men do want a child but don't want to get a woman pregnant to have his own genetic offspring. Maybe the artificial womb would be a solution for that individual. After all, women have sperm banks. It hasn't exactly brought the human species to a screeching halt. You traditionalists and your religious worship of the nuclear family bombard us with idiotic over-the-top panic-driven statements, to which we being more on the philosophical side, who entertain 1,000,001 possibilities, then mention theoretical solutions to theoretical problems. The sperm bank hasn't replaced men, and the artificial womb won't replace women. However, for some women the sperm bank has replaced men, but only for some women. The artificial womb might replace women for some men. Their dildo has not replaced the penis, nor has the blow-up doll replaced the vagina, but for some people it has aided in more gratifying masturbation during periods where they did not have a partner, and so in some regard it has helped with gender autonomy by making the moments without a partner less lonely or less sexually frustrating. But it hasn't stopped humans from hooking up. The dildo and blow-up doll has not ended human sexual and romantic relationships, nor will even more technologically advanced versions of these things. Webcam hookups hasn't ended real-life dating. But I think on some level these things have helped people to have more sexual and romantic gratification without the need to throw themselves at unsuitable partners out of desperation. I don't know of any MGTOW that is seriously running on some political platform to replace all male-on-female human interaction with robots and artificial wombs by this time next year or even within their lifetime. We're just talking about how in the distant future the ways in which these technologies can aid some people in autonomy. I find it hilarious how our discussion of these great distant future technological possibilities induces so much worry that your sacred unbreakable holy God-given nuclear family marriage model feels so threatened. If nuclear family and marriage is so fundamental, so scripted into our DNA, with no other possibility, why does every little thing threaten it? Why does the idea that a few men will marry men cause you traditionalists to quake in your boots that it will bring about the end of the world? Marriage will forever die, and our entire society will crumble as gay marriage rips away at the moral fabric of our lives. Why does every little thing make you feel so threatened if your nuclear family bullshit is so natural and God-given? Anyhow, to draw a parallel between Elliot Rodger's desire to kill off women and enslave a few to keep up population, with MGTOW talking about technological possibilities in the future that can aid autonomy, is laughable. Even if there are some MGTOW that are more serious about replacing human relations with robot relations in the not-so-distant future, this is still miles away from declaring women should be killed off and enslaved, and forced against their will to breed. Those two things aren't even close to being the same. It's like saying the guy who goes around killing horses because he hates animals is the same thing as the guy inventing the automobile because if we're all driving cars we won't ride horses, thus won't breed them, thus we are killing them. Comparing the invention of the automobile with animal cruelty would be no less inaccurate than you comparing Elliot's bizarre plans to MGTOW's discussion of future technology. You know, Mr. E, you toss out the word narcissist like it's going out of style. I think with your Elliot Rodger video, this may be the one video where you call someone a narcissist and it's actually true. If you want to see another narcissist, look in the mirror. You exhibit a pretty high amount of narcissism yourself. You're incapable of having a disagreement with someone without resorting to name-calling and character assassination. More specifically, you demonize your intellectual opposition as either morally wicked or mentally ill. In pretty much every video you accuse people, who aren't even leftists, of being leftists. You assign Marxism and Marxian thought to everything you disagree with, like an evangelist blaming all things he disagrees with on Satan. You call everyone a narcissist, psychopath, and nihilist. Speaking of that, you use nihilist in a pejorative, in situations where it is name-calling rather than an assigning of actual philosophical belief. I don't even think you know what the fuck a nihilist is. I've always overlooked this since most pseudo-intellectuals that want to sound smart and have studied philosophy on Wikipedia for at least 3 or 4 days, likes to toss out the word nihilist in a pejorative manner, and often conflate it with idealism, defeatism, or pessimism. Again, I'd overlook your misuse of the word nihilism, since it is a common mistake, but you've made multiple philosophical errors. You call your show Rocking Philosophy, your chat's Philosochat, you're billing yourself as a philosopher, and yet you don't actually know philosophy, and for the record neither do I, but I at least know enough to know that you don't actually know what the fuck you're talking about. Sort of like how you don't actually have to be a computer expert to know that overclocking your wireless network adapter or modem won't actually get you faster download speeds. That feminist guy named Sequester Zone, as much as I don't agree with this guy, and intend on pwning him in the near future, he pwned your ignorance of philosophy. Quite frankly, Mr. E, you're an intellectual fraud. In fact, I am going to link to mirrors of Sequester Zone's pwnage of you. They're mirrors because the originals were flagged. Not that I am accusing you, Mr. E. You call MGTOW, Barbar, Stardusk, just everyone that disagrees with you, a narcissist, a psychopath. In other words, you are good, you are great, you are magnificent, you are awesome. All those that disagree are either wicked, or insane. You don't think there is anything narcissistic about viewing all intellectual opposition as evil or insane? And more than just insane, even the mental illnesses themselves are more associated with acts of evilness, moral acid, immorality, poor moral character. You are constantly calling your opposition evil, that is to say, demonizing your opponents. Are you just so narcissistic that you are incapable of believing someone could disagree with you, and not exactly be an evil piece of shit? Has anyone let you in on this little secret, that at the end of the day, all of your preaching, all of my preaching, all of Barbara's preaching, they're just opinions, and in the grown-up world, people disagree with other people's opinions. This doesn't make them evil, wicked, mentally ill, bad, or subhuman. I realize I am skating on the thin ice of hypocrisy considering how many times I have accused others of narcissism, and are here accusing you of it, but I use this accusation sparingly, and my fans will attest that I often give my opposition too much credit and too much benefit of the doubt. Even when I made a 2-hour video critiquing the critical G, I highlighted some of his arguments against MGTOW that I thought were valid, and I still claim I don't think he's a bad guy. Though I haven't kept up with his videos over the past year, I'll say he is a gentleman in the last few PMs we had, and I don't think he is stupid, crazy, or evil. I just happen to disagree with his traditionalist conservative views on gender politics. I don't declare him evil for this, but with you, everyone that doesn't nod their head in agreement seems to be a narcissist and a psychopath. You're really that egotistical and self-righteous. And speaking of mentally ill people I disagree with, Femitheist Divine has made a video on Elliot Rodger, and I agree with her assessment of him, the situation, and her take on the media's coverage of it. I find myself in full agreement. She does not like MRAs or MGTOW, and hates John the Other, Paul Elam, and AVFM with a venomous passion, and considering they doxed her, I can see the justification for her relentless hatred of them. But even she had enough class to not implicate MRM, MGTOW or AVFM. It's sad RockingMrE, when Femitheist Divine has more class, honesty, and integrity than you do. About a year and a half ago, me and her began writing to each other, all the while disagreeing with each other's ideological viewpoint, but having the adult maturity to overlook ideological differences. Eventually our friendship fell apart, we had a falling out, we have not been on speaking terms for close to a year now, we got no love lost between us, and I still have to give this woman credit for being more mature, accurate, and honest than you are. She could have exploited this tragedy like so many feminists, could have used this opportunity to insinuate the dangerous teachings of AVFM, could have turned this whole thing into AVFM and their registerher.com list of offenders and talked about how Elliot was fueled by their words, and how many people on this list, including herself, can expect an Elliot Rodger to come after them. She could have really went for the jugular, but she, Little Miss Male Population Reduction, had more intellectual honesty and integrity than that, more than you. And that's fucking sad mystery, when I am holding my head in shame that a former MRA is actually having his ass handed to him by a cultural Marxist male feminist, and is being outclassed as a human being, by a woman who's deservedly earned the title gender Nazi. That's sad. That's a really sad day, but that's just how dishonest, intellectually fraudulent, and morally bankrupt you are. I could make a case that Elliot Rodger was a traditionalist like you. He wanted to be in a relationship with a woman. How traditional? He jealously envied couples because he so desperately wanted to be in a monogamous relationship with a woman. He deeply pestered his mother to marry into wealth, for his own gain of course, therefore he was pro-marriage. He was very angry that his mother and father divorced, because apparently he was raised to believe in the sanctity of nuclear family. He can't have stepmoms and stepdads. Fuck no, nuclear family or get the fuck out. Clearly this man was a traditionalist, driven by his hegemonic heteronormative conceptualization of monogamous romance with a woman. If only we as a society had sexually diversified him, he could have had a boyfriend or been part of a swingers dating pack. Do you see how anyone can plaster this story with enough bullshit to make an argument for a self-serving political goal? It's dishonest. He wasn't a traditionalist, or a feminist, or an MRA or a MGTOW, nor did any of this shit play any role whatsoever in his behavior. Let me ask the audience something. If any of you are still subscribed to this asshole, why, even if you are a conservative traditionalist, do you really want to take this guy seriously? Can you really respect a petty child who deliberately and falsely conflates the Santa Barbara killing with a branch of the men's rights movement, all because he is a butthurt child who got into an argument with Stardust and other MGTOW nearly 2 years ago? Do you have any trust of a person who would stoop to this level to hammer an opposing ideology, to have any more integrity when discussing any other political body or philosophy he disagrees with? Again, even if you hate MGTOW, ask yourself this: if we can agree it was deceitful and low class to exploit the Santa Barbara massacre, turning it into an attack against the men's movement by conflating Elliot's misogyny with men's rights, Does it just suddenly become any less of a lying, underhanded, exploitative tactic when RockingMrE does it to attack MGTOW? Is he in any way better than the feminists when they did it?